Hi all, a very good morning. So in the part of our yesterday session, we were able to look through what is called as NACL, that is Network Access Control List. So in terms of perspective with the security, we look through how we can secure our complete VPC, right? So we see how allow rules and well as the deny rules both can be kept through on the NACL part, right? In security groups, we can only allow the specific ports and IP addresses. But in terms of the NACL, we will be able to completely play around with allow as well as the deny rules as such. So today in the part of our session, we are going to discuss about what is VPC flow logs. It is the last part of our VPC section. So let me quickly navigate into my AWS console. So there we are in the VPC section. So I'll quickly, in the AWS, I'll quickly navigate to the VPC section here. I'm in the Mumbai region. There we go. So I have got two VPCs in our Mumbai region. So one of them is a default VPC and one of them is a VPC that we have created. So the last part, as I said, for the VPC section is about the flow logs. So what is the flow logs? Now flow logs is basically like if you want to track across from which IP address who is trying to access your VPC at what point of time. If you want to track across all those requests, it is like we have to enable the logging feature on the VPC section. How do we do it across? So that is done by flow logs. So it's very simple to set up your flow logs. Just come down to your VPCs, select the VPC that you want to enable with the flow logs, and then quickly click on the actions and then just say create flow log. And it's going to come up with a small screen here, which is going to ask us few more details. So it's going to ask you for the filter. So would you like to capture all the kind of requests, whichever gets accepted and whichever gets rejected, or only the ones with accept or ones with reject? So I'm going to keep it all for a while, and it's going to ask me for a role. So currently we do not have a role, because remember, if you want to talk with any service in the AWS, like one service wants to talk to another service, the secured way of establishing a connection is by creating a role. So we have to create a role. Now, which service is the VPC going to talk to? VPC is going to talk to a service called as CloudWatch. Just go again, open the new console portion. Yeah. So we are going to go ahead and put across our logs in the CloudWatch, and the VPC is a service which wants to talk to that specific CloudWatch service. So we need to actually establish a role between those two so that it can easily communicate with the CloudWatch. So it's very easy. Just click on this setup permissions and all the things will be automatically done for you. Taking a little while to the page. Okay, there we go. So we have got a automatically IAM page where the role has been automatically created. All that I need to do is just recheck the certain number of things. So it says that VPC flow logs is requesting the permission to use resources in your account. So what are we trying to do here? The VPC flow logs wants the access to the CloudWatch groups so that it can publish the logs there. So the name of the role is here. I'm saying create a IAM role, and the name of the role is going to be flow logs role. And this is the policy document which is going to get attached. So what are we trying to do here? So basically we are saying that in this JSON document, the action should be like logs create group, logs create log stream, logs describe log group, describe log streams, and the put log events. So this role will help VPC to get all these actions to be done. And the effect is basically allow, and resource can be anything else. And I'm just going to go ahead and say allow this. So the role has now been created. I'll go back to my VPC page. We were trying to create the flow logs. So if I now again go back and refresh this section, here you'll be able to see the flow logs role. I'll click on this. And then finally, there's one more thing that we need to go with, that is destination log group. So currently I do not have any. So let's go ahead and create one log group. So I'll navigate to the services called as CloudWatch from here. So there we have the page of CloudWatch opened up. So I'm going to click on the logs here. This is the place where we are going to keep all the logs. So it's going to ask you to create a log group. So we need to create a log group which can be actually put across in this page where we create the flow logs. So let's go ahead and create a log group. I'll just say this is for VPC with the name AWS training. So there we go. Now the log group has been created. So all we need to do is submit that log group here. Again, click on this and it's going to refresh automatically and the name is going to load. I'll click this and then just go ahead and say create flow logs. That's it. So we need two things while we try to set up flow logs. One is the role so that the VPC will be able to communicate with the CloudWatch service. And second, in the CloudWatch, we need to have a log group where I can actually go ahead and make the logs recorded, right? So in a little while, maybe after some time, the logs will start flowing inside this log group. So there will be log streams inside this. So it will start creating a lot of streams for certain point of time, maybe for every 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 15 minutes, and it starts recording the activity with what's happening with this VPC. So that is how we get started with the flow logs for the VPC section. So any questions or queries here from any one of you? Yeah, the flow logs are basically, let's say you want to go ahead and track out who is trying to access your VPC at what point of time, from which IP addresses the requests are coming in. So if you want to track out, because now VPC is basically a virtual private cloud, right? It's a private space for any specific company. So if you want to track out whether the requests are coming from the public internet or whether the requests are coming from only the specific desired range of IP addresses, like let's say you have created a, yeah, let's take up this example. Like let's say we are working with XYZ company. XYZ company has created a private space which has got hosting of all the internal websites of the XYZ. So now whenever you're inside the company, you will be able to seamlessly access this, but company actually wants to restrict the access from the outside world. So people who are trying to access it from outside world, they should not be able to do. Of course we have the security in place, but let's say someone has actually got some VPN access or some gateways requested, and then they're trying to access it from outside the world. But then my company finds out that no, they are trying to misuse the information while trying to log in from the VPN, right? So they can easily find out which requests from the VPN have come across, which is trying to misuse it, right? So it will be easily located from the flow logs. So flow logs will have the IP addresses. Now, if someone is accessing from the company, I will have a specific CIDR block range, right? So company also has got a set of internet addresses, IP addresses assigned to it. So that will be like this. Let's say 10.0.0.0/16. So I know that only from these requests, these IP addresses only, the requests are going to come down to my VPC for the company. If a part anything is coming outside, then we can easily track out from which VPN connection whose request has actually come down, so that we can track the misuse being done across. So the flow logs basically help you to find out who is trying to access your VPC at what point of time, from which IP address, and other things. So it's just like a logging feature to help you track each and every activity that is happening in your VPC. The flow logs will come in a little while, so we may have to wait for some time. So maybe I'll just keep this VPC for a while, and we'll see that automatically the flow logs will come into this, and then we can check out what's here. So it basically comes with two different requests. One is accept, as we saw here when we were trying to create it. So it comes with two different requests. One is accept and the reject, right? So what do? Is basically we create the flow logs, and those flow logs can be actually also directly sent across to the third party tools like Splunk or something else, so that you can generate the analytical graphs and other things. So maybe we'll just wait for a little while here. Automatically this flow logs will come into this. It takes a little while for this. Okay. In the meantime, so just quickly reviewing what all we learned through the VPC. So we learned what is a VPC. It is a virtual private cloud. And then we learned what is a public and the private subnet, right? And then we learned what are the different types of VPCs. So whenever you click on Start VPC Wizard, these are the different types of VPCs we can actually create. Here he has written single. It doesn't restrict to the single. You can create multiple subnets which are all public. So that's why if you remember in our notepad, I have written like VPC with public subnets, VPC with public and private subnets, VPC with public and private with the connection to hardware VPN, and then VPC with the private subnets and the hardware VPN. So these are the four different types of VPCs that we will be completely able to establish. And we learned how the hard way of how to create a VPC. So there are 6 steps in which we will be able to create a specific VPC. So first we created directly the name of VPC, and then the CIDR block range, and then the tenancy, And then we went ahead and checked out that the route table is created automatically, NACL is created automatically, security group is created automatically the moment I'm going to create a VPC. So there will be a default NACL, there will be a default security group, and there will be a main route table the moment I'm going to create a VPC. And we started creating the subnets. So one of them was 10.0.1.0/24, second was 10.0.2.0/24. And then we created an internet gateway, and we attached this internet gateway to the VPC. And finally, we created a route table which defines which of this subnet is going to be a public or which of this subnet is going to be a private. Right? And in the second stage, we discussed how the instances in the, then we launched 2 instances in each of this subnet, that is in public subnet 1, in the private subnet 1. So we saw that public subnet is completely accessible over the internet from the outside world, as well as the instance can access everything on the internet. But when we take the case of the instance in the private subnet, it was not possible. So what did we do? We actually learned how to set up a NAT. So NAT can be set up in 2 ways. One is the NAT gateway, and the second is a NAT instance. So we saw that how gateway is very simple and easier to set up, and then we'll also learn about the instance. Now there's a difference why NAT gateway is preferable over the NAT instance. Now if you see in the NAT instance, whenever we are going to the step 3 to launch a specific NAT instance, I have to select the size. Right, so the moment I select the AMI, after that I select a size, that is T2 micro, which has got 1 GB RAM and 1 virtual core of CPU. But tomorrow, let's say I have got thousands of EC2 instances and there is only one NAT instance, then thousands of instances in the private subnet are trying to access the internet to get the updates of the packages. Will this NAT instance be sufficient? So it is like this. Let me open the Paint. So when you talk about the NAT instance, let's say when I talk about the size, let's say this is the specific size of this. So let's say this is the size of the EC2 instance for now, which says 1 virtual core of CPU and 1 GB of RAM. Now, if I have got thousands of EC2 instances, as I just said now, in the private subnet, let's say this is the place from where the private subnets are trying to get access. So let's say I have got lots of instances who are trying to now access the internet over this NAT. So what happens, since this is of size 1 virtual core of CPU and 1 GB of RAM, and if all of them try to get the packages from the internet, it becomes difficult because the size of the, you can compare this like a road here. So the size of the road is very narrow, so it becomes difficult. So the requests are going to throttle in between, and that is when you have to actually increase the size of your NAT instance. So it's not necessary that you need to have a NAT instance of 1 virtual core of CPU and 1 GB of RAM. Since that we are trying to explore the part of free tier, we just made use of that so that we don't incur any other cost. So in the real time, the situation would depend on what would be the size of the instance that you require based upon the number of instances that want to access the internet. So if you think there are more numbers, then you can just go ahead and straight away increase the size of your NAT to a little bigger one. So maybe M1 large or C4 large could be something you can look to see the chance for. Right, now what happens to the NAT gateway? NAT gateways, as I said, they are very new. They have been just come across into the VPC section in the last year around June or before June, I guess. Yeah, maybe, but it was in the last year itself when it was being announced. And the NAT gateways are very easier to set up, and it can automatically scale up to 10 Gbps. So I do not have to worry even if I so let's say tomorrow, even if lots of other EC2 instances are going to come into picture here, so I do not have to worry about them because NAT gateway has a capability of automatically resizing according to the need. So it can maximum go up to 10 Gbps. Right, so NAT instance specifically has a dependency on the size of the instance. In the NAT gateway, everything scales up automatically. And the best thing is it doesn't have, the NAT gateway doesn't have anything called a source destination check, right? So I don't have to worry about any kind of this source destination check, neither the security group, nothing, right? I can straight away go create a NAT gateway and just put it in the public subnet and use the elastic IP and edit the route table. That is enough for me. But in terms of NAT instance, I need to ensure that the correct and appropriate security group is present and the source destination checks are also disabled. If I do not disable the source destination check, then the NAT instance is not going to work as a NAT. So those are the few differences between the NAT instance and the NAT gateway. Remember, the first is about throttling the requests, number of requests that come, because it is dependent on the size. And the second is basically the NAT gateway doesn't have any dependencies on security groups or the source destination check. And then we learned what is called as a bastion host or a jump box, we call it as, right? So we know that the NAT is a way in which the private instances get access towards the internet. But if someone really wants to come inside the private instances, how do we do it, right? So that is basically done with the help of bastion host or a jump box. So some administrator really needs to get access into the EC2 section of the private subnet. So how do they access? So they have a jump box setup which will be open only to the administrator of the company or a certain set of people whose IP addresses are clearly known, and only those people will be able to log in into this jump box, and from that jump box they will be easily able to work on the instances in the private subnet. Yeah, so in a part of yesterday's section, we learned about what is called as NACL, that is Network Access Control List. Like we have got security groups at the instance level, we have got NACL at the VPC level. Now, NACL is basically a firewall and it is applicable completely across subnet, while security group is applicable only to an instance. NACL is applicable across the subnet. So if I'm launching 100 EC2 instances in one single subnet, then remember it is going to be applicable for the all 100 EC2 instances in this case. So security group is only applicable for one instance or at an instance level, while the NACL is applicable across the subnet levels. And remember, single NACL can be a part of multiple subnets. So if I have one NACL, I can have it across the multiple subnets. So NACL is something like a firewall. So what I believe, taking this as an example would be, let me show you once more. So this is our VPC. Since we are in Mumbai, we have got two different availability zones. And this is subnet 1. This is a subnet 2. And this is the internet gateway. Okay. So what is NACL here? NACL is just like a firewall. Firewall is nothing but a fence across this specific subnet. Okay, so this is like a fencing across this building. So a building can have a protection, right? So I need to have a protection across the complete building here. So I'm just trying to put across a small fence. So this is like a NACL. Now, two buildings can share a one common security wall, right? Or I can also have each building having its own NACL. Right? But it doesn't make any sense if I'm trying to put it like this, having one NACL on the top and then having one more boundary to get inside, right? So it doesn't make any sense here. So usually that's why we say one NACL can be part of multiple subnets. So it can accommodate multiple subnets, And if you talk from the subnet level, one subnet can be always associated with the only one NACL here. This is what we have written. So single NACL can be a part of multiple subnets, but one subnet can be part of only one NACL. It cannot have more than one firewall boundary. And then we saw how the allow and the deny rules both are applicable. We learned something about ephemeral ports which are really required in order to be opened up so that we will be able to access the internet. And then the rules are usually written in the multiples of the 100. Remember, they are numbered rules and we are going to write in the multiples of 100. And remember what is the difference between the default NACL and the custom NACL. So in the default NACL, everything is allowed in terms of inbound traffic as well as in the terms of outbound traffic. And in terms of the custom NACL, we have the inbound traffic which is denied. Outbound traffic is also again denied overall. So just remember the security group and the NACL differences. It is really important not just from the terms of exam but also from the terms of the interview, because wherever we go they really expect you to know what is security and how do we do it in terms of the creating a VPC or creating a EC2 section, right? So what is NACL, what is security group, we need to know across it in detail on how these work, what are they and how do we play around with it. And today we just learned about what is called as flow logs, which is going to help my VPC set across the logs whichever are going to happen on my VPC. They will be getting recorded into this CloudWatch here. So I guess maybe we may not have any because we have not accessed anything on a VPC yet. So I'll just see if I'll just keep it for a while, maybe when I'm trying to play around with my VPC. Yeah, VPC peering we are going to cover, but DHCP options and other things are all a part of networking and a higher level of AWS that comes into more into AWS professional on what are DHCP options, what is egress only internet connections, endpoints, and then the VPNs. So those setups are all usually a part of advanced networking or a AWS professional part. So where we actually learned about how to set up a VPN in terms of static and the dynamic IP addresses, what is something called as IPsec connections. So if you really have got a corporate data center, how do we connect it with the existing AWS VPC when you have created it? No, we have not mentioned those in the course content because they are all the advanced topics. VPC peering we are going to cover in the next part of the application services. So there are at last two more sections that we are left with. One of them is application services, and the second is finally we are going to look for the AWS project. And there are some more services that, as I said, we are going to cover up, like about ALBs and the NLB, and also a little with the Elastic Cache. So those are the couple of things that we are going to cover up in next upcoming classes. Approximately, I would say around 8 to 9 classes should be sufficient enough to go forward with. So that was all about the VPC. So anyway, we are going to come back to this VPC section again to learn the peering in a practical part. So what is a peering and how do we do across? So overall, mainly the VPC section covers up with something called as how to set it up, what is a public, what is a private, what is a NAT, and Sure, let me pick this up sometime in the next session about the command lines, what we can do, because mostly what the command line way we use is across how do we communicate between the S3 and the EC2, because that is the most widely used service across any of this. However, let me check through, because we do not use command line tools to set up a VPC. Of course, we can do it, but we do not use that much because we directly use any of these DevOps tools. We call it as, one of them is CloudFormation and the second is Terraform. Yeah, so basically we write all the commands inside this CloudFormation or the Terraform, and this is something like this. I'll just show you. Yeah, CloudFront we are going to do, because CloudFront is again the service that we are going to completely put across in the practical part of our final project. Here it is. So this is the kind of JSON templates that we basically use across. So you can write the CloudFormation in two different types. It is JSON and the YAML. And now here he's just trying to create a specific VPC. Like, remember the way we were trying to create the VPC here. The first, if you remember the first part of the VPC, step one is creating a VPC with the name, CIDR block range, and the tenancy. Same thing he's trying to define here. So he's trying to say that I want to use the AWS template format. He is doing the version of the template, and then the resources he's telling that I'm going to create a VPC, and the type is going to be here like AWS and the EC2 and the VPC. So properties, the CIDR block range is the one that we are going to define, and then tenancy is going to be dedicated, and he's trying to put across the tags. The same thing he has written in this YAML. So I'll just try to put across some examples on how to create a VPC in the CloudFormation. So Terraform is more about a third-party tool. So we will try to cover up the CloudFormation part, where we'll learn how to create a VPC, how to create an EC2 instance, and some more things. So there's one more thing that we're going to look forward, that is about the CloudFront in detail on with the practical lab in the from the S3 section, and then we're going to jump forward with these three sections, that is application services, project, and the security white papers. So application services is more about knowing about the different services. We may not have the practical portion in each of these, but some of them usually have it. Like in SNS, we are going to do a practical part. VPC peering, we are going to do a practical part. And yeah, so those are the couple of things we are going to do, but rest apart are the things that we actually need to know what we can do with these services, like what is SQS, what is SWF, what is resources and tagging. Yeah, resource and tagging is again like a practical part. What is Kinesis, what is elastic transcoder, what do they do, right? So from the point of exam perspective, we should really know, as well as from the point of interview perspective, we should know what are these services and what each of them is responsible for. So as a part of application services, we are going to cover up all of these, in which we have labs for only few of them, like VPC peering, SNS, resources and tagging. Rest apart, all are the theory based topics where we are going to get an understanding of what is the service and what can we do along with it. So these are the set of topics which are remaining for the application services. From the S3, we have one part that is CloudFront, and then we are going to look forward to the project. So this is the project that we are going to establish, in which we are going to make use of all the things that we have actually learned through. So we are going to set up a CloudFront, we are going to set up a Route 53, we are going to set up the S3 buckets, we are going to set up the EC2 instances using the auto scaling and the load balancer, and then we are going to have a multi-AZ database setup, which will be completely done inside a specific VPC. Right? So we are going to create a first VPC of our own, and inside which we are going to completely set this up. So before we close for the day, I would just like to give you one small update here on this VPC section. How to create a highly available architecture. Yeah, so this is about the resilient architectures. So if you want to really create a resilient architecture, what does the resilient architecture basically mean? Now, if you remember from the way the Amazon has set up the VPCs, right? When we talk about the default VPC, what happens in the default VPC, right? It has created a VPC like this, which has got a bifurcation here because of the two availability zones. So in the Mumbai region, I have got two availability zones, and this is a default VPC in which, let's say, I have one subnet in this availability zone and one subnet in this specific availability zone. Now, if you remember the way global infrastructure is set up, it says that even if one of the availability zone goes down, people should be still able to access the data from the another one. But if I just have one subnet in this, right? Let's say I have hosted a database or web server here, and if this goes down, what will happen in this case, right? So in our case, what we have done, we have created this to be a part of public subnet, and this to be a part of private subnet. Like I have hosted a web server here, which is going to be something like Flipkart, and let's say the database is being put across here. Now in this case, even if one of them goes down, right? So let's say this goes down completely, then what happens? Then the people will not be able to access flipkart.com. Or if this goes down, then what happens in this case? Then people will be able to access Flipkart, but they'll not be able to place the orders, right? So this is a very tricky situation. How can I deal with this specific portion then? So that is where we talk about the resilient architectures or highly available architectures, we can call it as. So how do you actually build across the highly available architectures? Now, the moment I go ahead and create a VPC, right? So let's say this is my VPC which has been created. So as I said, we are not limited to the number of subnets. We can create any number of subnets depending upon the CIDR block range of my VPC. Since my VPC is of block range 6/16, I have got 65,536 IP addresses. So it depends upon me how many subnets I would like to create. So I can create subnet 1 here. Let me pick up the black one. So what I'll do is I'll create one subnet here, one more subnet in this itself, and one more subnet here, and one more subnet here, right? So there are 4 subnets that we have actually created in the 2 different availability zones. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put up my web server in this. Web server 1, I'll put across my web server 2 here. Okay, so this is web server 2 web servers, and I'm logically going to group them across here in this. So I'm going to logically group them, and these are going to be logically grouped across. So now this is my one set that is called as public subnet. The line in the red you see is a public subnet. The line in the red you see is next one here is basically a private subnet. Now you might be wondering how this happens. Now let me show you here practically portion. Like we have got the 10.0.0/16 as a set of IP addresses set is the range for the VPC, which has got 65,536 IP addresses. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create 4 subnets. So first is 1.0, second is 10.0.2.0. Then I'm going to create 10.0.3.0, 10.0.4.0. So since we are just creating a bar 24, I can create up to 256 IP addresses in each of these sections, right? So I'm just consuming around thousands, approximately 1,000 IP addresses, not more than that from this 65,000. So we created 4 subnets in this. Now remember, whenever we are going to create 4 subnets, all these are going to be a part of default route table, right? So when I create my own custom route table, I can define that this is going to be a part of route table which has got access to the internet gateway. Similarly, I can say that 3.0 is the one that has got access towards the internet, right? So now 1.0 and 3.0 are basically become the public subnets because I have created a custom route table and I have attached both of them to the custom route table which has got access towards the internet. And these two, that is 2.0 and 4.0, are basically in the part of private, right? So both of them are in different availability zone. Here the 10.0.1.0 is this one, 10.0.3.0 is this one, 10.0.2 is this one, 10.0.4 is this one. So we have actually created across the 4 different subnets in 2 different availability zones. So this is going to be a part of availability zone 1. This is going to be a part of availability zone 2. So let me do it practically and show it to you so that it will be much more clearer for you guys. So I'll just go ahead, and I already have 2 subnets here, right? First I'll delete the route table. I'll just delete the my internet route table for a while so that all of them get tagged to the default route table itself. Remove this internet gateway. Okay, so for now you can see that I have a VPC with the name AWS Training, which has got a CIDR block range of 10.0.0.0/16. It has got only 2 subnets at this point of time, and both of them are completely private in nature because there is no route which is defined outside to the internet, right? So we have created an internet gateway, but we have not given access who is going to have a gate towards them, right? So we have not defined who is going to get the gate inside this specific premises at this point of time. So first I'm going to go ahead and create all the subnets which are required. So as I said, I want to create a highly available design, so I'm going to create couple of more subnets here. So I'll just name it as 10.0.3.0 for a while, and then the availability zone preference will be again 1A. So the availability zone 1A will have 2 subnets. If you see, this is my availability zone. So 1A is having 2 subnets, 1B is having 2 more subnets. So I'll create it in 1A. I'll define it as 10.0.3.0/24. So this is going to get across So there we go. That is the 3rd subnet. I'll similarly create a 4th one. This is going to be 10.0.4.0, part of AWS Training. Preference will be 1B, and this will have 10.0.4.0/24. right? So we have now, if you remember, if you just go and scroll this part, yeah. So this one, if I say with the VPC, it is showing me 10.0, 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, and 4.0. Each of them has got 251 IP addresses. And in the availability zone AP South 1A, I have got two of them, that is 1.0 and 3.0. And in the 2.0 and 4.0 are part of 1B. Right now, I'm going to go down to the route table, create my route table here, and then I'll say my internet IGW, sorry, my internet RT, and this is going to be a part of the AWS Training VPC. So specifically here, I'm going to define which are the two subnets which are going to become a part of the public, right? So I'll just go ahead and say, so I'll just go ahead and add it here. And type the IGW and then save this. And then go to subnet associations. And then I'm going to say that 1 and 3 are going to be basically a part of this internet, right? Because 1 is in the availability zone 1A and the 3 is in the availability zone. Okay, sorry, here 3 is also part of availability zone. One sec. Yeah, so I'll remove this. I'll just take 1 and 2 as a part of internet. So what happens in this case now? So I have one availability zone, one subnet in the availability zone 1A and the second in the 1B. So this is 10.0.1.0, this is 10.0.2.0. So now I have logically grouped them with the help of a routing table. So now I'm going to host my web server. Flipkart will be available in the availability zone 1 as well as Flipkart will be available in the availability zone 2 as well. Now the logically grouping has been done across here, and this is a part of subnet 1, subnet 2, and these are both public subnets. So here is the internet gateway that is going to get tagged. So it will be placed upon this, so that two of these web servers are now called as public subnets, and this will be completely isolated across. These are both 10.0.3.0 and 4.0, right? So I will have a database which is hosted in both of them. So even if one of them goes down, my database will be still on. Now, even if one of the web server goes down, I still have the another one switched on. So that is how I basically create a highly available architectures. So any questions or queries before we close down for the day? Okay. So just practice out this part of section when you're trying to do it. Just you may want to explore this resilient architecture, because now that we have also learned about what is called a load balancer, right? So you can actually go ahead and create a VPC. So this is a just task for you. Just try to create a VPC which has got highly available architecture in terms of 2 public subnets and 2 private subnets. Try to host a web server in both of them and put across a load balancer in front of it, and see that even if one of them goes down, I am still able to access the web page from the other one. Just try this small example of the web server by hosting it in 2 different public subnets, and then try to see that, try to make one of them just go down and try to do it. Okay. Okay then, so we'll meet back again in the next part of our class. Thanks all for your time. Have a great day and weekend.